Well, welcome to today's webinar, which is a series of events brought to you by Open Group. Today's event is being led by Biz Design, which is a very active member of the Open Group, and our speakers today are Ben Gills and Ron Crozier. Hand over to our speakers to start their presentation. Just let me go over a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, with regards to questions, clearly would encourage you to ask questions. And the way to do so is to write your questions in the text QA facility. If you do write a question there, please can I ask you to address it to all or all participants. That way everyone gets to see all the questions that are being asked. And Ron and Baz will answer the questions at the end of the presentation. This event is also being recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave early or if you experience any local technical difficulties, then a full recording of this event will be available from tomorrow. And everyone who's registered for it will get an email with the appropriate URL where you can access that recording. I also believe that these slides will be made available. I know that Biz Design usually do, but I'm sure that Baz and Rob will give you details of that as they go through their presentation. So, Rob and Baz, if you're ready, can I ask you to make a start?
Edmund, thank you very much. Welcome everybody on our behalf to the webinar on integrating models to improve performance, strategy, architecture, roadmaps, and process design. As Simon already mentioned, we will indeed make the slides available on our site. In the last few slides of this deck, find the URL where you can download the slides. So before then, let's quickly look at the agenda. First, introductions, so you know who we are. Then we'll dive into some theory with respect to model-based change and how to align different levels of models, if you will, going from strategy all the way down to implementation. And then we'll dive into the more practical where we can show how you can do this tool-based approach. And at least, of course, there are some tips and further reading that also have the link to where you can download the slides. So then quickly what we're going to cover today. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Bas van Gils. I'm a consultant, trainer, and researcher for business design. I've been for the last 5 years or so, mostly in the Netherlands, but I've also done some international work in the UK, in Belgium, Germany, and Canada. And part of the experience that I had throughout those assignments have made it into today's presentations. You'll see some contact information. We're pretty active on Twitter, but also on the Biz Design blog. So if you have any questions or suggestions, please drop us a note, and of course we'll be happy to help you further.
Yes, my introductory slide. My name is Rob Crozier, and I consulted at Biz Design. I'm also trainer in just like Archimate, TOGAF, tool, and I'm also active in the field of business requirements management. What I do in my work is help customers in setting up an EA practice in the Netherlands, but also abroad, like Canada. You can reach me via Twitter. You can see the details where you can contact me on the bottom of the slide.
Well, great. Let's quickly look at Biz Design then. We have several service lines. Today, of course, we'll talk more about enterprise architecture and management, but also business modeling, process management, and business requirements management. You'll see examples for each of those service lines, so it's a rather broad presentation. Each of those service lines, we have an integrated service offering, and we mean that we offer both consulting services. This is what both Rob and myself do on a day-to-day basis. For tooling, use some examples of our tools today. We do a lot of training, and of course we also share best practices, often co-developed with our customers. Examples are currently in a project, so that's consulting, and best practices from that project will be documented in a book which will be released early next year, so keep your eyes open for that one. Biz Design started in the Netherlands about a dozen years ago or so, but currently we're a global company. We have offices throughout Europe. We're also opening shop in North America, slowing out on our way to world domination, so to speak. If you have any questions on who to contact, please drop us a note, and we'll gladly get you in touch with a colleague who is near to you. All right, so that's enough for introductions. Let's dive into the meat of today's presentation. What goes on in organizations today, they argue that the only constant is change. Some examples from our recent portfolio of assignments. A telecom organization that goes into banking, so you could say that's pretty much a strategic positioning. Quite a major transformation project which goes on for several years, I would say. Some redesign of an organization, so basically we're staying into the same business, the same field, but the way we go about our business changes drastically, which requires a reorganization, redoing our processes, redoing the IT landscape, and all that sort of stuff. It's also pretty major. Another example, building a foundation for decision making based on analytics. This is the most the trend at the moment, where organizations are using big data more and more. Rationalized decision making based on data and big data is pretty important for a lot of organizations. But it all requires a lot of change, and not just in the technology space. A more classic example, restructuring of the application landscape, pretty major as well. This could be, for example, because we're introducing a service-oriented architecture, or because we're decoupling the data from the systems in which they are managed. Maybe we're moving to process automation, all that sort of stuff. But just some examples of changes that organizations these days face. Now, having one of them in it is tricky already, right? It's tricky to begin with. One is that organizations often face several of these challenges at the same time. And it becomes more and more important to have them in an integral manner. Not new, of course. If you look, for example, at the work of James Martin in the late 70s, early 80s, he always also advocated a modern approach to handle all these changes that organizations have to face. So in that sense, it's not new, but what's changed is the support and the approaches that we have available for handling that type of change. We're talking about mostly today. But then at a slightly different angle, so visit some of these challenges that I just mentioned. At the top, strategic changes. Strategic management deals with the question how to position ourselves with respect to environment. So what is the arena that we want to compete in? What position do we want to have in that arena? Who are competitors? Who are our customers? That type of challenge. Look at that from a modeling perspective. What you do, and what is done increasingly, is to use the business model canvas for writing out what your strategic direction is. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. If we talk change at that level, the full technique to use is capability-based planning, which, for example, we'll also find in the TOGAF standard. It's not unique to TOGAF, you also see it in other approaches, but it does play a prominent part in TOGAF. So from strategy to architecture is also a strategic discipline, but it answers a different question. Architects try to solve the puzzle back to the question, how should we organize ourselves? And this is across the board, across the entire organization. Not just IT, also business, infrastructure, and every other aspect of the enterprise that you can think of. One modeling here is Archimate, right? The Open Group standard for architecture modeling. Architecture, of course, by itself is not enough. Architecture consists of an organization, and of course you want to drill down into more detail. And this is process management, data management, and business rule management come into play. In a variety of languages such as UML, Unified Modeling Language, and BPM, both by DOM, and for TDM, the decision model. And we've heard that the OMG is also working on a graphics notation for TDM. So more details to follow, But you see that model-based approaches are relevant and should be able to support you at each of those levels. Models by itself is of course useful and interesting, but insufficient. If you handle those changes in an integral manner, then this slide attempts to visualize the fact that the models should be linked. So at how you see the business model canvas, and elements from the canvas should be related to your architecture models, by capability-based planning or directly. We'll show you how that is done in our tool in Business Design Architect. And it will show, for example, how Archimate models can be refined into more design models such as EM, UML, and BPMN. Right? Proof of the pudding is in the eating. That's something we often hear. By all the way from business model canvas, which is strategy, all the way to design and implementation, and linking all those levels in between will help organizations in being successful. So at some of these types of models. First is model canvas. Just mentioned, business model canvas by Osterwalder et al. A very popular approach for documented business models, basically the outcome of the strategic process. It's often assumed that organizations have a very planned and rationalized approach to doing strategy. This may be the case, so you can also use this after the fact to, so to speak, to document your strategy. But the power of the business model canvas is that it allows you to give a executive overview of your business model. Elements in the business model canvas to be modeled from right to left. So you often start with modeling who are your customers or groups of customers. So customer segmentation is important. And then move to the left. What relationship do we have with the customer? How do we interact with them? What are the channels? What is their proposition? So what type of value do we offer to our customers? What are our products? And then down into what activities and resources, what are our key partners, and what is the cost and benefit structure. So this is one page overview of your strategy. Very high level, low text, so to speak. We often use yellow sticky notes to map this out. But that is part of the reason why this is so successful. So some of the highlights here. The model canvas, very popular worldwide. It's used by both strategists, architects, management. You see it everywhere, basically. It provides a single map of the business model of an enterprise. Enterprise you can see as the entire organization, also of departments or divisions. For example, in the project that Rob and I are into right now, we've used it both at the whole of enterprise level as well as at the divisional level. And so those models are linked. It allows the outward perspective, so reasoning from your competitive advantage outside to your strategic positioning, but also the other way around, outside. Look from opportunities in the market, reading all the way back to the key activities, key resources. Easy to use. It's also supported by Business Design Architect. And if you're interested in more details, you can check out our blog. There's a series of postings there by our colleague Remco Blom. And you can also download a free ebook with example business models, of course made in Architect from the link that you see here on the slide. So at another technique. Here I have capability-based planning taken from the TOGAF standard. Capability-based planning basically a technique that allows you to look at the capabilities of your organization at a very high level of abstraction along two axes. First axis is the increment axis. So where now, what is the next step going to be, and how do we the development of the capability? Done along the different dimensions. So the people dimension, process dimension, and material dimension on the left. On the web diagram on the bottom right shows you how those dimensions are growing over time. Perhaps you've seen the recent webinar that I've done for the Open Group as well on building a data management capability with Ref and Archimate Here I've chosen several dimensions related to data management, so the axis of the spiderweb diagram, and I showed how you can use planning techniques to see where you can invest first. And many organizations that would be, for example, investing in a strong data management culture before diving into tools and process. Right, very high level. It's very it's easy to communicate about these spiderweb diagrams, and they tend to work very especially with higher levels of management. Some highlights from this this technique based on the TOGAF standard. Capabilities of the organization are considered various dimensions. You can make those dimensions yourself, right? Often we see people, process, tools, culture, and maybe technology. You can choose them yourself. If you really want to go down into the nitty-gritty, you can also assign KPIs to each of those dimensions. So how are we going to measure the level of capability for people? How are we going to measure the level of capability for process, tools, and so forth and so on? And what are we going to invest in over the next few months? That's 1 hour of capability-based planning. So this technique, organizations can plan the growth of capabilities, also about the interplay between capabilities. If choices have to be made, we always have to deal with scarce resources. So the next increment going to be, where are we going to invest? This is where the technique is mostly used. But it doesn't say a whole lot yet about what to change exactly in more detail. You need language for that, and where Archimate comes into play. Here we see an overview of the core Archimate. I'll go in a little bit more detail in a minute. Archimate consists of the core, which we see here, and 2 extensions. One is the motivation extension. Motivation extension deals with the why question. So holders, concerns, goals, that sort of stuff. The also migration extension, which deals with project planning, work packages, and that sort of stuff. It's more related to implementing an architecture. So let's talk about Archimate core for a minute. Archimate core modeling language. As you can see here, we have concepts, those are the boxes, and relate, those are the lines, and paint an integral picture of the enterprise. Right, so over 3 layers, 3 domains: the business domain, the application domain, and the technology domain. And it's structured further with the 3 aspects: so structure, elements in the real world that show behavior itself, and the passive structure. Structure is often confused with information. I know that, and for example, when you work for Tata Steel, information that we're pushing around, it's steel and coal and all sorts of physical stuff. That's also modeled with elements from the passive structure aspect. If you look at this high-level overview of the language, you tend to think that it's a complicated language because there are so many different types of boxes and different types of lines. It's really not true. Give me 3 or 4 hours, then I'll be able to explain most of the framework to you in a way that you'll never forget it anymore. It typically works out. Doing a full training on the language is about a day. If you want to cover the language as well as the tool, it comes to a day or 2, maybe 2.5. If you want to include certification, it boils down to 3 days. Advantages of Archimate. There's also the option of certification by the open group. Some more links and references at the end of the slide. History for Archimate. Originally developed in the Netherlands, started about 2002, 2003 for Archimate 1. Once that was released, it has been adopted by the open group and aligned increasingly with TOGAF. And it provides extensive support for both baseline architectures, so the architecture of today, and architectures, the architecture of tomorrow, and all the in-between states. There's also two extensions. This allows us to model motivation and requirements of stakeholders, as well as the realization of architectures through work packages. Then involved in development of the language, Design Architect was of course first native tool implemented Archimate, and you get we still play a very active role in the group in the Archimate forum. So most of the features that are being proposed, we also have either full implementation or draft implementations available. So to talk more about the tool, then do get in touch with us. So now from the architecture level into more the detailed design level, if you will. One of the key languages there is BPMN. BPMN, a business process modeling notation, a very elaborate set of concepts with an approach on how to model processes and different aspects of processes. There's really several types of diagrams in the BPMN standard. It's both the power and one of the challenges of learning BPMN. On the left, you see an overview of the most used concepts in this language. If you look at the full set of concepts in the BPMN language, you'd need a zero-sized poster, that's a square meter, with very tiny symbols that explain each and every concept that's in there. So it'll to very precisely model every aspect of a process, the cost of having to learn a lot of concepts. Right? For process modeling, this is absolutely where the community is heading towards. An open OG standard, the UML, has been around a little bit longer, I would say. Mid-East was the first version. UML is one of the key modeling language in the areas of software design. It's always more at the enterprise level. We also see it used in the field of data modeling. A lot seem to think that it will replace the entity relationship diagram sometime. Personally, I'm not too sure. But if you drill down from the enterprise level all the way down into the detailed design, you move into the UML. Many different types of diagrams. Here you see a type tree. The class diagram is probably the most used one. I see the component diagrams a lot. Deployment diagrams, so which software goes where. Activity diagrams, a lot of them are out there and are used for purposes by different professionals. I mentioned BPMN and UML are both open standards, and they're design level and they're managed and supported by the OMG. There's a talk about aligning Archimate with some of those standards. So how do you drill down from an application component with data into UML? How do you down a process in Archimate down to, let's say, BPMN, and link back into the business model canvas, for example. Now, we have a partial solution, and Rob will tell you all about it in a minute when we dive into the example section. The model that I want to discuss briefly is the decision model, another open standard. It was published by Bob Halle and Larry Goldberg a few years ago. Some people think the decision model is mostly about decision tables, but it actually goes a few steps further. It's a rigorous approach to modeling decisions, using business rules and business rule families, and they go all the way up from strategic decision making to very operationalized decision making in your, for example, in your automated processes. And because a formal model behind it, you can actually test your business model, so you can put in some test cases to see if the model, the outcomes of your decisions are predictable. Or if you implement it as in a tool, and we recently did that, we launched its TDM proposition 2 weeks ago, I believe. About tool-based implementation of TDM, you can also export to open rule and deploy it on your favorite rule engine. So that can really do full promise of model execution, this time, in this case, in the area of business rules. Here, an example. At the octagon is it represents a decision that is to be made in the business. So after a series of interviews with business executives, we've identified that the term policy renewal method is an important business decision to be made. And then you'll see that this decision is based on some rule families. right? The policy renewal method, which is decomposed into pricing within bounds and policy underwriting risk, and that is decomposed further, and so forth and so on. So it's a very simple notation, but you'll find a rigorous approach based on decision tables and for logic to write down your decisions and test them before you implement them automatically, for example, in your favorite rule engine. Enough for now. If you want to know more about TDM, have a look at our blog. There's several very good posts, and we all have a recorded webinar available from Larry Goldberg, the inventor of TDM. So before handing over to Rob, I want to say a few more words about tool support in this space. We've covered quite a few approaches in the enterprise space related to change, of course. How to deal with tooling. So in Tool Suite, we've taken the point of view that different users have different needs. So doing modeling at the strategy level is something different from doing modeling at the architecture level, which is different from doing detailed design. Those disciplines are so different, you need flexible and solutions for each of those groups of modelers. So that's the starting point. However, having those models available on their own is not enough. It's a start, but only you want to link the models. As we explained before, how does activity in your canvas link to a process in your architecture model, and how to flesh it out in more detail in, let's say, TDM and BPMN. Such a common repository available where the models are linked is key in successfully dealing with those major changes in the organization. So the bridge for communication with various stakeholders. Right? On top of that common repository, you can have visualization tools such as a portal or let's say PowerPoint exports or Word exports that allow you to do visualizations for various stakeholders. Because modeling is still a communications game, and dealing with change based on models requires talking to many different stakeholders. And with that, I'll leave you in the capable hands of Rob, who will walk us through an example.
Yeah, thank you for this of the different languages. And indeed, we're now dive into the details in an example. Example case, which is called Arc Assurance. As you already may know this case because there is a famous case explaining the Archimate language. But this case is more advanced because it connects all the different languages which we saw in the introduction. So Business Model Canvas, Archimate, BPMN, TM. I'll say 2 slides about the background of what you're going to see. You have an idea where the example is about. An insurance company which offers multiple insurances to different customers and also gives multiple products. So not only has insurances but also travel insurances and some more. Arc Insurance was actually not one company. It is formed a merger, which you can see on the next slide. So Insurance is actually a merger of 3 companies. An insurance company, a profit car insurance company, so was only selling car insurances, and another party which was dealing with more legal insurances. All different insurance companies are merged together in one new company, which is called Assurance. If we add the slide about change, well, a big change for a company. You merge 3 companies together with their processes, their own applications, their own data, and you merge it. Well, you have a lot of work to do. Modeling this space, there you need to model integrate to view of this company. What are the processes we need in this new company? Which applications do we need? Which kind of data do we want to use? How are we going to deploy your processes? And which business rules we apply. a good case to explain how we can use these models together to facilitate this major change. Background, so here you see something about the new structure which has been thought of. So we go to a short sort of front office, back office structure, in which say that we have an headquarter with a front office, and then multiple back offices, which may be specialized into the car department or the legal departments and the departments. And we create a shared service center for generic back office facilities like and other stuff. Well, in case, how we then use all these models together to make models of this new company. Start at the beginning. We want an integrated modeling environment. And we saw in the previous slide that you can use one common repository to all your different models. Slide you see how this in practice can look like. So you write what we call a model package, which is actually your complete repository of all your models. In case for arc assurance. So we see arc assurance, and there we see with numbering. In this case, the different models we and connect to each other. So we with one, the business model canvas, to Archimate, and then TMN, TDM, and UML. And then maybe more important is the latest in the repository. There's cross-model relations. Relations between all the different domains are stored. Not only model all those domains, but they are connected to each other. So in case you create a common repository where multiple modeling languages are stored and are connected to each other. You always can relate back all the elements from a level, from EM, BPMN, all the way to your strategy level. Concept, but how this then look like in practice. Let's start with a strategy, with this model canvas. Here we have a business model canvas for this new arc assurance company. You just use stick notes to place our key partners at the left, banks, automobile shops. Furthermore, right, we see key activities, some key resources, or positions, relationships. For example, speed in handling is extremely important for a new company. Customer segments, so we not only focus on households but also on business. We have multiple customer segments. We start our channels. Which channel do we want to use to keep in contact with our customers? And bottom, cost and revenues. So what is our cost structure and which new streams have? On a very high level. And look at your right, you see there again the repository structure. We see they have now dived in at the business model canvas level. So, in our sticky notes. Now the question is, how can we now move forward from this business model canvas to modeling on a lower level, on an enterprise architecture level? Well, nice that you can translate such business model canvas to see some Archimate concepts. We've done this in the next slide. If we use the Archimate mapping, show the right button, to automatically transfer this business model canvas to, well, it's really still a business model canvas, but now the objects you see there are already of Archimate concepts. For example, the key partners on the left are transferred into business actors in Archimate language. The key activities are transferred to business processes in the Archimate language. Of course, connect to each other, so we don't see the relations yet. But as we have now, based on our business model canvas, the concepts of enterprise architecture, so that the cost and the cost structure and revenue streams are not transferred into specific Archimate concepts, then yourself, how do you want to incorporate those aspects into your enterprise architecture? Into detail, and we found one aspect of our enterprise architecture, and chosen this now called business process handling claims. Business process handling claims is of course the activity of our new insurance company. This is business process we need to implement. Okay, this process, how does it look like in a bit detail, and like in context of all the aspects we have in our enterprise architecture. Now we go to the Archimate level. Next slide. So now from the business model canvas level to the Archimate level, you see so on the right in our repository browser that now at the Archimate level. And this same handling claims process. But it is not on itself, it is now related to some services we deliver to the customers. You see them on top of this process. For example, the registration service is that the business process reassesses and all the customers. Also, you see that the handling claim process is dealt a bit more out in some process. So, for example, it consists of a claim intake and a claim process. And all the more you see some relations to other business processes like closed contract at the bottom. And example also for the closed contract business process, we made some already to some application services like CloseServe and CS. So we're now from the business model canvas level towards Archimate level. But to drill down into more detail to describe these two business processes, for example, claim intake and SS claim, we need to define activities there. So if you want to model in even detail, really define and describe your business processes, then to move forward to the BPMN standards. So with these two business processes and model them further in the BPMN language. Like again, handle claim process, the two sub-processes, claim take and SS claim, but now into detail with activities, gateways, data that is used, which events it has related to. Please that is used here is also as the same as the business process in Archimate. Processes, claim intake and SS claim, and for example in claim intake we see then a task in BPMN language which is called determine claim admissibility. So now drill down from Archimate towards BPMN. Of course, yeah, there's more to tell, and you may have noticed already that two tasks in this diagram have icons. Think we made to the underlying rules that are used in these tasks. So, for example, to determine the amount payable, so the task on the right, certain rules are used there to determine this amount, and the goal is can be to really model in detail the underlying business rules. So you don't model all the rules in your business process. You model business process like here, just a little process step you take. All the underlying rules is modeled in the model where you can dive into detail in the underlying decision and rules family that is used there. And in the repository, you can simply click on this icon and dive towards this model. So now I'm going to for the repository, the decision model. We start and the two tasks we saw earlier. So the amount payable and determine claim admissibility, which are in practice decisions in the decision model. But these are based on a certain rule set or rule family, and those are shown here in green. Payable and claim admissibility, but you see in the diagram that this rule is based on rules, so there are kinds of relations between those rules, and precisely is defined is in a so-called glossary of the team, which is on the next slide. Underlying glossary of our decision model. On the left, we have some fact types, with basic questions, and all the fact types together determine what the outcome of the decision will be. These fact types. For example, there the fourth row amount payable results in the domain of money. With that, we maybe also need something like payment behavior, which is on the third row, and then be good or bad. So this is a Boolean. Also some detailed description for each type, which asks the question, what does this fact type answer? And if you answer for each fact type, then based on the diagram we saw earlier, PDM model can automatically define what the outcome of the decision will be. So if values will be filled in, current column, current value, then you can test your business rule set. And are connected to your BPMN level, which we saw earlier. So there we have them connected or complete business processes and our business rules set. Very interesting about this glossary. You got the right and entity attributes, because fact types, they refer often to some kind of information you need to answer. In the whole, it is about claim and policies, and we're going to ask claim which elements of this claim are important to decide whether we are going to claim or not this claim. The policy is also important there. What is the policy of this insurance, and what do we have agreed with the customer? You need kind of data often to answer to the question in your business process. And this, from TDM perspective, the link can be made towards your data modeling, to example, your UML class diagram. You use these entity types and entity attributes, and they are not a lot linked towards my data model in my UML class diagram. This is so you scan the entity type claim, which has some entity attributes. For example, details of the damage, and completeness, and attributes we saw also in our glossary for business. Right, we are now in our repository browser, all of UML. Also related to the policy, and that way you have the right answer to your decision. What we know in a short example, is all the way drill down, starting from a business model canvas towards automate, take processes there, detail them further out in the business modeling notation, towards it in the decision model, and entities in the decision model towards my UML class diagram. Links are very important, but you want to answer the question, okay, how is then everything related? Can I always go back and forward? Once the use of such a repository plays, because you have done this in a good way, then you can do navigation towards your whole repository. On the left, what we call navigator, and it's all the way up with this sticky note handling claims from original business model canvas. And this is refined in handling claims in Archimate model, linked in my handle process in BPMN, which is some sub-processes and tasks in BPMN. Task, for example, these the claim admissibility, there the decision of my model is associated. And it's with full family and connected to my UML. So you all model B, which acts from the top all down towards UML. Whole navigation path through your whole repository of models. And just for one element, example, but it is on each level, then you can always, from every point in your model repository, do the navigation and how your complete enterprise looks like on the different domains. Alternatively, you see on the right, you can show this kind of analysis in table. So without all the in between, we show how my elements in my business model canvas are related to elements in my class diagram. Well, in this is just one, but in this you also can ask questions with different model domains without showing all the layers in between. So, for example, if you want to know which business rules are supporting which elements in my parse architecture or in my business model canvas, all these questions you can answer and show in table form. It's very long to explain how my complete integral modeling is. With the practical example of how I can connect these models to each other and how it then looks like. We have some keys and some reading. And my key message is there are a lot of different model languages for different levels, but to change all those languages in on a certain moment and in a certain way. But it becomes long if you connect all those different languages to each other, and therefore you need something like a common repository in which you can link these different modeling environments to each other. And if you read more about Archimate, please our blog, and also a link where you can find a copy of the slides. So go to bizdesign.com/downloads, and then you download a copy of the slide. If you know more about our tool, because the screenshots are from Business Design Architect, please go to the link at the right bottom. There you download the free trial. It comes RC, so I would like over to Simon, then I'm going to discuss some questions.
Guys, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Baz, for that. Yes, we have a few questions coming in. So if you have any questions, please do write them in the text facility. The QA facility is the best one. I'm going to just work our way through some of the ones that are in the chat, then move on to the QA. We've got a few in here. So the first question I'm going to look at is, how do you create target vision from the enterprise goals and objectives you have defined for players? And he says, including target technology.
Yeah, I'll take that one. That's actually a very interesting question. So let's start at the top right. In model canvas, note that there's this section where you can model the key resources for your enterprise. So that's the first spot where you could see things like which technologies are of the utmost essence for my enterprise. It then drill down into the architecture level. Architecture gives an answer to the question, how should we organize ourselves across the board? We start with modeling the baseline architecture. This is where we are today. But of course also, with the motivation extension that we very briefly touched upon, model the high-level goals of the enterprise, flesh out into more details using principles and business requirements, and drill down all the way to the target architecture, which is modeled in terms of business processes, application systems, and also, of course, the supporting infrastructure. you can connect all the way up from your strategic direction down to business requirements, principles, and ultimately technology.
Okay, fantastic. Another question. Could you talk about best practices about changes in BMC, how those changes can be tracked and translated to the underlying design levels?
Yeah, that's of course also a very cool question. But now we're talking about very important realm, the strategic management. Whether organizations decide to document their current strategy or not, every organization has a strategy. So let's say we are going to document it. I'm going to document it using the business model canvas. The organization faces all sorts of challenges, and in the current economic climate, I'm sure we can all think of plenty of examples of economic challenges. So what we do is develop a new business model, right? We do a workshop session with yellow sticky notes and forth and so on. So that have the business model in a canvas and the target business model also modeled in a canvas. In our tooling, and we didn't cover it today, it's of a few clicks where you can do a gap analysis between current business model and the desired business model, and that gap may actually be the driver for developing a new architecture, maybe with some capability-based planning in between. Tool support will actually help you make that step, the transition, a whole lot easier.
Thank you. Just moving to some questions on the QA facility. Question from Guy. Do you maintain a separation between models under development, approved models, essentially dev and prod model versions?
Yeah, that one, Simon. Yeah, indeed, create an environment in which you have an environment in which you do the so you get some kind of development, acceptance, and test environments, like with applications, but then with your models. So you create in your repository. We didn't saw it in the example, but then you have 3 or 4 levels, which you then have a procedure defined when a model is checked in. Then people can review it, and only when it is accepted, then it moves to what the new environment. So environment is indeed possible to include in your repository. And to say that if you have to ask the question, do you need this? This is only needed in very large organizations with a very of different designers and architects. So if you have small organizations, then in my opinion, it's not really valuable and to work like that. But in large organizations, you may need it.
Thank you. Question from Jan he's asking for a little clarification. He's saying, did I understand you correctly that BMC artifacts can be translated to Archimate entities, but relationships between the two are not preserved in the tool?
Well, let me go on. Indeed, he is correct. The steps of your bidder model canvas are automatically translated into Archimate concepts. But the thing is, if you just place sticky notes in your business model canvas, you didn't even draw any relations. So, and there are also not any relations in Archimate. May argue that you already on your business model canvas want to draw some lines. Practice, it's only, mostly in my experience, only placing some sticky notes, so you only define your objects. But maybe
yeah, there's a bit more to say about that one. As we argued before, business model canvas mainly works with the blocks that we saw on the canvas and yellow sticky notes. So it's not really a rigorous formal meta model behind them. We also part of the meta model of Archimate, which does have that formal rigor. And just guesstimating how your yellow sticky notes translate into Archimate concepts and how lines between sticky notes translate into formal relations is tricky to say, at least. So the mapping from the canvas to Archimate concepts works really well. I would say 80-90% solution in practice. Translating lines to formulations is actually a much harder problem to solve because the line could mean pretty much everything.
Okay. Got a question here from Arvind, and he's basically saying, has this been implemented in any company successfully? And he goes on and says, building a process to integrate all these models across disparate teams in an enterprise is not easy. Governance and operation of this process will be very challenging. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
Absolutely agree. This is a big puzzle. It is very challenging, and parts of it have been implemented successfully. I know some organizations who've done, for example, this model canvas part in conjunction with the Archimate part. Other organizations have been very successful with Archimate, PMN, and MLUML. For our current assignment, we use those 3 levels. I must be honest here, and I haven't seen any organizations yet that went all the way from strategy and business canvas down into detailed design models in a single tool at a single point in time, let's say for a single change or a single project even. We expect to see that more over the next few years. Trend to do this and having that friendly tool support available is a very powerful driver in organizations.
Yeah, experience we get this question of some customers more and more. They discover themselves that they want to connect these different modeling domains to each other. So I think indeed the demand of this kind of modeling will increase in the coming years. And so it will be the future at the end to integrate all those domains in each other.
Great. I think a good follow-up question here from Popescu, just basically asking, what are the advantages of using this approach?
First, you have to be a believer in the model-based approach, right? In organizations, we see, let's say, those who don't believe in models and then are suddenly forced to do modeling, and then, somewhat disgruntled, they start doing it. If that's in your organization, then you may ask yourself the question, is this an approach that will suit us fine? I do believe in a model-based approach, so rationalized decision-making based on rigorous analysis of the current situation or the current situations. This approach, where you connect different models at different levels of abstraction, will give you the rigor that you need for implementing complex changes. Because the areas in your organization that are interlinked and are increasingly complex. And also, strategic decision-making requires a whole different set of concepts than, say, detailed software design, where UML comes into place. By having that distinction between different tools for different levels of abstraction in the enterprise, but maintaining the connection will guarantee consistency. The power of the approach lies.
That's great. Gary's asking, I think, a very common challenge. He said, is there a useful way to visualize and present this complex architectural information in a way suitable for C-level non-architects?
Yes, there is. Indeed, this architectural diagrams can be look complex for non-architects or C-level. What the tool has functionality to relay, okay, we make a different visualization, so a different view for different stakeholders. So, for example, I use this what I call C-level view, which then a formal Archimate diagram is visualized with just blocks or lines or some other symbols like a piece or a factory or like that. And we actually have a great success here with this kind of approach that's at task steel. If we transferred some architecture diagrams into level visualizations, and we really showed it at the CEO of Task Steel Europe, well, he got the message. So if you take time to indeed from formal architectural description, translate it and make a nice visualization also for really non-architects, then you can also get the message across at those kind of stakeholders.
Yeah, I agree with Rob here. There have been numerous examples where we've used Archimate models and you brush them up in such a way. It sometimes takes a bit of time. Then also use them to discuss things with top management. In Tata Steel, we also have some examples with banks, with KLM services, various customers with different stakeholders that use these models as a basis for decision making and design of the future enterprise.
Guys, well, I noticed that we've reached the end of our allotted hour, so I think it would be a really good place to end today's event. If you have any questions that we haven't responded to, feel free to send them through. You can either send them through to either Rob or Baz, or I'm quite happy to act as an intermediate. If you want to send it to me, I can forward it to the guys. Likewise, if you want a copy of their presentation, the URL is still on the screen, so that's the bizdesign.com/downloads. You'll find these slides, and I think many more slides there as well. So at this time, Rob and Baz, I'd like to thank you two for your time for this presentation. I'd like to thank everyone else for taking the time out to join us. And Rob, Baz, have you got any final points you'd just like to make?
Yeah. So not only is this very useful, it's also a lot of fun to work with these models at every level of the enterprise. So that's something to take home. Have fun. That's important.
Thanks very much, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.